and modern man being on the Earth for hundreds of thousands of years. Radiocarbon dating is not an exact science. An exact dating of any extremely old structure can be extremely tricky at best. The Bimini Wall was probably used as a harbor for ships. Port faculties resembling the Bimini Wall formation were being built in the Near East during the Middle Bronze Age, which corresponds to the radiocarbon dating of the site. Putting a harbor here would make sense to any of the seafaring cultures that may have had contact with the New World. The island sits in the underwater currents that allow faster navigation between the continents, and Bimini would be the probable last landfall for fresh water and supplies before leaving North America. We know one of the items ancient man may have been coming for was copper. An ancient copper mine has been found in North America that had tons of copper removed from it. It is unknown who removed the copper and where it went to. In the 1990s, older natives of Bimini testified that they would see waves washing over the tops of the stones of the Bimini Wall at low tide when they were young. The wall was still intact until the 1900s. It was visible at low tide and was designated a navigational hazard to ships. In the early 1920s, a Florida salvage company dismantled the wall down to its lowest layers, and the blocks were taken to Miami where they were used as fill for the city's new quayside. When we look at the Bimini Wall now, we only see a ruin of an ancient ruin. Circumstantial evidence on the site suggests that Bimini was the site of an ancient outpost of one or more old world cultures. Hopefully one day more evidence can be found in the area that might tell us who were the travelers that came to Bimini in the distant past. Ghost towns and abandoned cities can be fascinating places to explore. They stand in silent testament to those who once lived there and to the circumstances of their demise. In most cases, we know why towns are abandoned. The gold ran out, disease, war. The people moved to a more promising location. Knowing how the towns failed by no means takes away from the aura of mystery for those who explore the sites. It's fascinating to see if any traces of those who lived there can be seen and to see what might have been left behind. In the U.S., the classic ghost towns are out west. These towns were built up around the mining industry and abandoned when the mines failed and the miners left. Some may be surprised to find out that in Gloucester, Massachusetts, there exists the remains of a colonial ghost town. This town, once known as the Common Settlement, founded in 1642, was one of New England's most prosperous towns for the better part of a century. Predominantly a fishing town, it fell into decline around the 1750s when a new coastal road was built and drew people to the coast from the inland of the island. Deforestation had crippled the timber industry that had developed on the island, and due to the Revolutionary War, the town's male population had dwindled. That, coupled with fishing accidents, had claimed many sailors who were lost at sea, leaving the widows to survive as best they could in the common settlement. Around this time, the town would become known as Dogtown due to the many dogs that the widows had acquired for their protection and companionship. As the last of the widows passed away or were relocated by family, the town became inhabited by the dredges of society. Prostitutes and witches were said to inhabit the town. It is said that some of the wealthy men who came to Dogtown for their services, for the services of the prostitutes, disappeared. The witches in town would extort money and goods from those passing through town. They would threaten to put a spell or curse on them if they would not give them what they wanted. One legend stated that two boys had angered a witch from Dogtown. The boys had moved to upper New York State for a job. When the witch learned that the boys had left, she went out to her front yard and shot two arrows into the sky. Later, the families of the two boys were told that their sons were dead. They had died when two arrows fell out of the air and struck them in the heart. The homes in Dogtown started collapsing, eventually leaving the town abandoned. 1830 saw the last resident, Black Neil, removed from a cellar hole from a collapsed home and taken to the poorhouse. Years later, naturalist and historian Roger Babson would document the history of Dogtown and set land aside that he owned in the area for preservation. He also mapped the trails and the cellar holes and set up numbered boulders by the cellar holes to help locate the original spots that the homes once stood, and a way to reference who once lived there. The other interesting aspect of Dogtown is the grouping of large boulders that exist there. Tons of rocks and boulders are in the area, some huge. Scientists believe they were deposited there during the last ice age. The original Puritan settlers believed the flood of Noah deposited these stones. Babson also wrote inspirational messages on these rocks. The unique formations had drawn artists and poets to the area for inspiration. One such artist, Madsen Hartley, described Dogtown as a cross between Stonehenge and Easter Island, and not unlike Stonehenge, the rocks draw pagans to the site, who believe there is an energy that emits from these stones. Witches and others involved in the occult come to these formations and trails for ceremonies. Also, those who embrace the golf culture come to the site. So it's of no surprise that some have reported paranormal activity in the area. A woman dressed in black who disappears when followed, a large black cat who stalks visitors, and some believe that it is a remnant of the familiars that a witch would have had. Sounds of dogs howling in the area when there are no dogs there, and a rumored werewolf activity. Some of these accounts could fall into the category of people tapping into the romanticized notions of the old ghost town that once had witches. But some of this activity could be legitimate due to the fact that in modern times it is used by people involved in the occult, and that in itself could have spurred the paranormal activity which may have not existed in the past. But if one day you're walking down its abandoned trails, who knows what you might come across in Dogtown. Thank you for your interest in this show, and may God bless and keep you.
The Revelation 13 podcast is hosted by Mike Hopwood and is a podcast dedicated to the study of end-time events, news events, and ancient mysteries.